Okay, so yesterday we spoke about the we really concentrated yesterday on the verse which says here, verse number 5. We explained why Moshe Rabbeinu has to start explaining the Torah. we haven't had this up until now. We don't really have this. Moshe Rabbeinu transmits Torah, but he doesn't explain it. Mm-hmm. But now he has to explain the Torah because he's going to pass away, and there's going to be a whole different setup with regards to understanding Torah and giving over Torah, which is why he has to explain the methodology of Torah, how it works, how to be able to formulate halacha. So let's go down now to verse number 9, because it's what we did a little bit yesterday, but it's all going to flow one into the other. So Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Jewish people, that I can't do this by myself. I can't carry you by myself. This is, of course, going to introduce the moment when judges are being introduced. There's going to be a hierarchy. There's going to be one in charge of 10, one in charge of 50. We'll get there, Amit Hashem. We mentioned yesterday that there seems to be a little bit of a non sequitur. You get to the end of verse number 9, which is Moshe says that I can't carry you by myself, and then all of a sudden it says in verse number 10, Hashem Elokechem yirbe eschem v'inchem hayom kochavei hashamayim larov, that Moshe Rabbeinu says, wow, look how many of you there are. It's fantastic the way that you've multiplied. Isn't it wonderful? So the Mefarshim explain that when Moshe Rabbeinu says that I couldn't that I couldn't carry you by myself, he was waiting for the Jewish people to say, no, Moshe, we want you to lead us. We don't want somebody else to take over. We want you to be in charge. But the Jewish people didn't react. So Moshe then sort of deflects what he's just said. He goes off on a little bit of digression. He says, wow, isn't it fantastic the way that you've multiplied? And then it says like this, Hashem Elokeinu Seichem, turning over the page to 942 for those of you who are dedicated enough to want to do that. Yosef Aleichem Kachem Elef Piomim, that Moshe Rabbeinu blesses the Jewish people that they should be 1,000 times more than they are. V'yavarech eschem kasher diber lachem, and you should be blessed in the way that you are being blessed. It's interesting that the Jewish people came to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Medrash says that the Jewish people came to Moshe Rabbeinu and they complained. Right? Why did they complain? Because God said that the Jewish people will be like the stars in the sky, will be like the sand on the sand on the beaches, right? That's something you can't even begin to estimate how many there are. You can't count them. So when God says that the Jewish people should be like the stars in the sky, what's God saying? That we should be infinite. And yet Moshe Rabbeinu comes along and he says, no. He says 1,000 times more than you are. That should be enough. So the Jewish people come along and they say to Moshe Rabbeinu, that's not fair. God told us that we should be like the stars and we should be like the sand. Now you're coming along and you're restricting us to 1,000-fold, 1,000 times worth what we are right now. So Moshe Rabbeinu explains to them like this. He says, I'm not coming to restrict God's blessing on you at all. But a blessing like that can only come from God. That you should be infinite, that you should be like the stars of the sky, that's something which a human being can't bless you with something like that, because that's beyond a human being's spiritual capabilities. He said, but I'm blessing you with a maximum blessing that I can give you. I'm not trying to detract in any way. I want to bless you as well. So he's blessing them. There should be 1,000-fold. And then he says, verse number 12 is a very important verse. Now, you need to understand that Parshat Devarim, according to the order of the Parshiot, Parshat Devarim always appears, it's always the Parsha before Tisha B'Av, which means that we're always in the midst of the 9 days. We're sort of coming to the culmination of the mourning period for the destruction of the two temples. And over here in verse number 12, we're going to come across a word which is pretty famous, right? It starts off with the words Eicha es salavadi tarachachem umasechem v'rivchem. Now, when you go to shul on Shabbos morning, the person who's reading from the Torah, when he comes to verse number 12, is going to switch the tune from the regular tune that you use for learning the Torah to the tune of Eicha. Right? There's the Megillah, we'll talk about it in a moment, the Megillah that's read on Tisha B'Av. It's a very, very dirge-full Megillah. I don't think dirge-full is a word, but it is now, right? It's a very dirge-full Megillah. It's written by Yirmiyahu. Of course, it talks about the destruction and everything that went before the destruction, all the terrible things that happened to the Jewish people, and it's got its own little mournful tune, right? The truth of the matter is actually it's a very mournful tune, but it's actually a very beautiful tune. It's a very poignant tune. So over here, what the person reading the Torah is going to do when he gets to verse number 12, he's going to switch from the regular laning. He's going to switch into the Eicha, just for that verse. Right, what's going on over here? So let's try to understand. The word Eicha means, how is it possible? So Moshe Rabbeinu says, Eicha esalavadi, that how can I alone carry your... He's talking about the fact that the Jewish people are a very contrary nation, and he always has to deal with the tribulations of the arguments and everything and the disagreements. And he says, Eicha esalavadi, how can I do this by myself? So explain the Mefarshim something very, very fascinating. If you take a look at the Haftarah, it starts in 1195, but we need to get to 1196. If you take a look at verse number 21, it says, Eicha haisala zoina, this is the Yirmiyahu talking about Yerushalayim. Eicha haitala zona, how can it be that Yerushalayim has become like a prostitute, like a harlot? Kiryah ne'emona. You'll see also, Mitzvah Hashem, if you're paying attention, if you're still awake by the time you get to the Haftarah, that will also be read in the tune of Eicha. It's a very, it's like a, I'm sorry, I keep using the word even though it's not a word, but it's very dirgeful. And over here we've got the same phrase, Eicha, right? Eicha oisala zoina. How can it be that Yerushalayim has turned into, it's like prostituted itself? What does it mean that it's allowed foreign nations, it's allowed foreign armies to come into it and to destroy it? How can it be? Explain the Mefarshim, right? That we've got in the Megillah of Eicha itself, which is read, it's on page 1273, which is read on Tisha B'Av, both at night and in the morning. It starts off with the words Eicha Yoshva Badad. How can it be that she sits in solitude? We're talking again about Yerushalayim. How is it possible? To explain the Mefarshim, that there is explain the commentaries, there is like an evolutionary process over here. It starts off with Moshe Rabbeinu saying, Eicha esola vadi. How can it be that you want, how can I do this by myself? From the Eicha of Moshe, we end up with the Eicha in the Haftarah of Eicha Oisala Zona. How can it be that Yerushalayim has prostituted itself, and it ends up finally with the worst Eicha of all, which is Eicha Yeshva V'Dad, that Yerushalayim is alone, it's in solitude, it's lost everything, all its glory and its splendor. What's Pshat? What are we trying to understand? Is it just some kind of a game with the same word that appears itself over and over, or is there something deeper over here as well? So the answer is, of course, there's something much deeper. The answer is that due to the Jewish people's inability to accept responsibility for their own actions, that leads to the culmination, it culminates with the destruction of the temple. Which means that if the Jewish people would just be prepared to accept responsibility for the way that they behave, then Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't have ever had to have said, Eicha salavadi. How can it be that I can't carry all of this, I can't take this anymore, right? If the Jewish people would have just said that, we understand that we did something wrong, and we acknowledge that we did something wrong, and we'll try not to do it again, then Moshe Rabbeinu would have been in a better situation than he was in, and he wouldn't have had to have introduced other people to help him, which we'll see a little bit later on, wasn't really very good for the Jewish people. But because the Jewish people didn't accept responsibility on themselves, so then we end up over here in the Haftarah with Yirmiyahu saying, Eicha hoysal azona, that it's as if Yerushalayim has prostituted itself to allow other armies, conquering nations to come in and to take it over. And because the Jewish people weren't prepared to accept responsibility even at that point for what they've done, so we end up with Eicha Yoshva V'Dad, that the temple is destroyed and we're left with nothing. However, there's something even deeper over here. something even more fundamental. Where does it come from? This power of not accepting responsibility, where does it come from? Where does it come from, though? Fine, it's a power, but where does this power get its strength from? So let's have a look and see. If you go to page number 16, all the way back into Parshas Bereshis, right? What's going on? Chava, Eve, eats from the tree of knowledge, which she shouldn't have done. And Adam eats from the tree of knowledge, which he shouldn't have done. And here, verse number 9, Vayikra Hashem Elokim el ha'odam. So God calls out to Adam, Vayomer lo hayek, he says, where are you? Now, I don't know if you people realize this is a little bit of a strange question to ask for two reasons, right? First of all, God is almighty, all-seeing, omnipotent, all that kind of stuff, right? So we have to work on the premise that God knows where everybody is, right? On top of that, there are exactly two people in the world at the time. Which means, how complicated is it going to be to find two people? Vayomer Hashem Elokim el ha'odam, Vayomer lo hayeko. Where are you? So explain the Mefarshim, they say like this. That God's not asking where are you geographically? That's not his question. That's a ridiculous question. But rather, what's he asking? What have you done to yourself? Where are you spiritually? I gave you a mitzvah. The mitzvah was not to eat from the tree of knowledge, right? There's one prohibition. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge. What did you do? You ate from the tree of knowledge. How could you have done that? Ayeka. Move on just a little bit further. Verse number 12. Vayomer Adam. What does Adam say to God? Now, what would we expect Adam to say to God after he's been caught by HaKadosh Baruch Hu with his hand in the cookie jar? He's been caught red-handed, right? What are we supposed to expect from Adam now at this point? What's he supposed to say? What does he say? Verse number 12. Ha'isha shenasati imodi hi nasnali min ha'etz v'oichel. The woman that you gave me, she made me eat from the tree. Yeah, yipshat. What's he saying? That he understands that he can't deny the fact that he ate from the tree of knowledge, but he's going to wriggle out. In his mind, he's going to be able to wriggle out of the responsibility from eating the tree of knowledge. Why did you eat? Well, that blasted woman that you gave me, she's the one that made me eat. It's kind of sad, no? Here. What did God say? What did God say to him? Ayeka, where are you? Ayeka spells out the word Eicha. It's exactly the same letters. Right? The last word in verse number 9. Ayeka, where are you? What have you done to yourself? The ability for the Jewish people to ignore Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership, the ability of the Jewish people to ignore their own responsibility for their own actions, is not something which occurred for the first time in the desert when they're together with Moshe. The ability for Yirmiyahu to be able to say that Yerushalayim has become like a zona, like a prostitute, that it's given up its ownership because no one's prepared to take responsibility for what they've done. It's not something which occurred in the time of Yirmiyahu for the first time. And in Eicha, in the Megillah itself on Tisha B'Av, when the temple is destroyed because the Jewish people won't take responsibility for themselves, it's not something which appears out of a vacuum. It's not something which all of a sudden there in that moment in time the Jewish people stopped taking responsibility and that's why the temple was destroyed, but rather it's something which is brought into the world in the very beginning. It's brought into the world. The ability for human beings to be able to justify everything that they do. It's pretty terrifying, it really is.
What do you think Adam Rishon should have said?
Adam Rishon should have turned around to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and said, I'm wrong. I was wrong. No explanations, no justifications, no nothing. That's it. Just 3 words. I was wrong.
So we've been suffering from this cop-out forever.
It seems that Adam Rishon, right, has injected inside of all of us the ability, what do you call it, a cop-out, right? To cop out of responsibility, for sure, 100%.
The devil made me do it.
Yeah. You know, you should know, my kids when they were young, one of my daughters, that was her favorite refrain. Like, why did you do that? The Yetzer Hara made me do it. She was only little and it was very little things and it wasn't a big deal. The truth is, in those days she was like 3 or 4 years old. It was kind of cute. It's not so cute when you're 13 or when you're 30 and you're still saying the same thing. That's not so cute. Right? When you say my Yetzer Hara made me do it, what are you saying? You're saying it's not me. I'm pure as a driven snow. Really, I couldn't be better. I really couldn't. It's just that, I don't know. There's some kind of independent entity that's forcing me to do things that I don't want to do. It's not true. The emphasis, it's something unbelievable, right? It really. I tell you what the most unbelievable dimension of all of this is, that if we were prepared to stop and be honest with ourselves, then we would see that it is 1,000% true.
That.
This ability to be able to look at yourself and say, I'm okay. Even after we've just done something we shouldn't have done, we can look in the mirror and we say, you know what, I'm okay. It's fine.
It's called denial.
Denial. Yeah? But where is this ability to where is this ability to live in a state of denial? That's the 51st state of America, right? The state of denial. Where is this ability to live in denial?
It's a defense mechanism on the part of your mind.
Because what's the problem?
The problem is you don't want to accept responsibility.
The problem is that if you don't live in denial, then it means that you've got to acknowledge that you did something wrong. And we don't want to do that, right? You know the joke about the fellow who comes to the train station and he walks up to the ticket office. He says he wants a ticket he'd like a ticket for Jeopardy. One-way ticket to Jeopardy. The fellow says to him, wait, we don't have any place like that here. He says, yeah, I want a ticket to Jeopardy. So the fellow says, I'm sorry, but there's no such place. He says, there has to be such a place. He says, well, why do you say that? He says, I saw it today in the newspaper, it said 2,000 jobs in Jeopardy. I guess this city of Jeopardy is in the state of denial, I guess, right? Wherever it is. It's amazing. It's Parshat, I'm telling you, it's amazing. When you see the ability for us to be able to justify to ourselves why we did what we did and why it's okay. You know, they have in civil courts, you can claim temporary insanity. In Judaism, there's no temporary insanity doesn't exist. We acknowledge there's a concept called temporary insanity. That's a Yetzer Hara, but that's you. It's a part of who we are.
But we do tshuva, and that's when we take responsibility.
Very nice, right? So it says like this in the slichas that we recite on Yom Kippur. It says Aval anachnu chatanu, which means but we have sinned. The truth is the word aval, I don't know, maybe it really means verily, if you want to speak in biblical English. Verily we have sinned. Right? In truth we have sinned. So I once heard a fabulous explanation from Rav Leff. He said like this. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva that the minimum, it's called vidui, confession. The minimum confession that a person has to make is those three words. Aval anachnu chatanu. But we have sinned.
Why anachnu? Why not ani?
The truth is, if you take a look in the vidui, everything's in the plural.
You say ani before the other
Take a look at the Lashon. Take a look at the Lashon of all of that vidui that we recite in Yom Kippur over and over again. It's all right. It's all in the plural. In other words, we're bringing ourselves together for two reasons. First of all, because if I say I did, part of the problem is that some of those things that appear over there, I'm going to say, well, I didn't do them, right? But some of the stuff I did do, I don't really want God to pinpoint my mistakes. But on top of everything else, I want to be a part of the Jewish nation. I want to be judged together with everybody else. But God should see me as a part of the whole, not just as an individual. But Rav Leff said like this. The Rambam writes that the minimum vidui to recite is Aval anachnu chatanu. Those three words. Well, he said a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think there's a lot of depth to it. The Rambam writes, so that's a minimum confession, but we don't need the Rambam to tell us that, because obviously we all know what Aval anachnu chatanu means, but we have sinned. So obviously if we're saying we have sinned, we know that we're confessing. So Rav Leff said, no, he says, because for 364 days in the year, we say, anachnu chatanu aval. We have sinned, but it wasn't really me, it wasn't the way it looked, it couldn't have been, I'm not responsible, don't look at me. He says there's one day in the year where we have to say Aval Anachnu Chatanu. It's a definitive statement of fact. We're taking upon ourselves the responsibility for our actions. One day, the one difficult day in the year where you can't pin it on anybody except for yourself. So here, what do we got? We've got like an evolutionary process over here. The Eicha, the Ayeka of Adam Harishon, God saying to Adam Harishon, what have you done to yourself? Expecting Adam Harishon to get up and say, I'm sorry. And Adam Harishon doesn't do that. And then we move on to the Eicha of Moshe Rabbeinu, that I can't do this by myself because you people are too contrary. That's really what he's saying. You people just won't take responsibility for your own actions. You won't do it. Which leads us to the Eicha, the first Eicha of Yirmiyahu, when he looks at Yerushalayim and he can't believe that Yerushalayim has allowed itself to be occupied by whoever comes through it. And then it ends ultimately with the Eicha of Megillas Eicha, of the destruction of the temple. All of that is coming down to what? It's coming down to our responsibility. Each person's individual responsibility, and to take responsibility for your own actions. And that's why it's here now. Always the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av is the Shabbos where we're going to read these words over here, and then we're going to read them again in the Haftarah, and then we're going to read them again on Tisha B'Av. It's like the Eicha season.
Can you explain that the term Yom Kippur Katan? Little Yom Kippur.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a very interesting concept. There's a concept called Yom Kippur Katan. What is Yom Kippur Katan? The day before Rosh Chodesh. Today is Rosh Chodesh. The day before Rosh Chodesh is designated Yom Kippur Katan. Now, for the Sfardim, you won't be familiar with this, because by the Sfardim, the concept of Yom Kippur Katan doesn't exist. It is, I don't know how long ago it was put into place, but we're probably going back several hundred years into the Ashkenazi world, where they decided that it was a good idea to take the opportunity to have some kind of a reckoning for the month and to try to do tshuva, and that's why it's like a mini Yom Kippur. Some people even have the custom to fast on Yom Kippur Katan, and then when you've got a minyan of people that are fasting on Yom Kippur Katan, and at Mincha time they read from the Sefer Torah like on a regular fast day. There's a whole bunch of slichot which are recited. Right, at Mincha, it's all being done at Mincha in the afternoon, just before Rosh Chodesh. So I once heard the most beautiful mashal. The Chafetz Chaim once came to Warsaw, came to visit the Imre Emes, if my memory serves me correct, the Rabbi from Gur, and he wanted to find a minyan for Yom Kippur Katan, and obviously it was something which amongst the Lithuanian Jews it was something which was relatively regular, but amongst the Hasidim it wasn't so regular. And in all of Warsaw he couldn't find a minyan for Yom Kippur Katan. So he asked the Imre Emes, he asked the Rebbe from Gur if it was possible to make a minyan for Yom Kippur Katan in the Gera Beis HaMedrash in Warsaw. So he gave his permission, and the Chafetz Chaim asked for permission to speak before they started davening. So of course, the Chafetz Chaim was the Gadol Hador. He was the greatest Torah, he was the greatest rabbi in the generation, and of course the Imre Emes gave his permission, and the Chafetz Chaim said a very beautiful mashal. He said like this. He said there was once a fellow sitting on a train, a Jew sitting on a train going from where, I don't know where he was going to, from Pinsk to Minsk. And another Jew gets onto the train, and he's very happy because they sit down together, they start talking to each other. He says to him, tell me, he says, where are you going? So the second fellow says, I'm going to Minsk. So he says, that's fantastic, because I'm going to Minsk too. We'll be able to travel together. It'll be, great. We'll have company, and it will be good. Anyway, they're having a great time, and after a few hours, they pull into the first stop, and the fellow gets up, second fellow gets up, and he starts taking his bags down. He's about to get off the train, and the first fellow looks at him, and he says, tell me, he says, what are you doing? He says, this is not Minsk. Minsk is going to take 3 days to get to. Like, what are you getting off the train now for? So the fellow looks at him and he says, for you, there's no problem. You're a wealthy guy. You can buy a ticket that will take you from Pinsk to Minsk in one go without getting off the train. He says, I can't do that. He says, I have to get off at each stop, and I have to earn enough money to be able to get back on the train, the next train, and move on to the next stop until I'll get to Minsk. At some point I'll get there. So said the Chafetz Chaim to all the Hasidim that were gathered there in the Gera Beis HaMedrash, he says, for you people are all tzaddikim. So from one Yom Kippur to the next, you're okay. You don't have to worry about doing tshuva because you're all righteous and you'll get to the next Yom Kippur, you won't have too much to do. He says, but for the rest of us, it's Chofetz Chaim speaking, for the rest of us, he says, we like to, each station on the way, right? Every month is another station that's bringing us closer to Yom Kippur. Every month is another station that's going to get us back into the realm of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In order to be able to do that, we have to sort out that month. So we've got a Yom Kippur cotton, we turn it into a mini Yom Kippur. It's a very beautiful idea, right? Don't leave everything till the end.
So why don't they do it Rosh Chodesh every month?
There is. Every Erev Rosh Chodesh, there's a Yom Kippur cotton. So some places you'll find it much more often, and some places you won't find it. Right? There are certain shuls where they never have a Yom Kippur cotton service. It's very much to do with a custom. It's not halacha.
It's a Litvish.
I think
Mostly in Ashkenazi.
Most of the yeshiva belt does it. That's what it is.
So when I was a bocher in yeshiva, many years ago, when I was a bocher in yeshivas like you didn't hear about yeshivas davening Yom Kippur cotton. Now, over the last few years, it's become something that yeshivas do. I mean, to do with it, the terrible state of affairs over here in Israel with what's going on. So it's just an opportunity to try to get people into the state of mind of doing tshuva and of raising themselves up and whatever. I mean, it's
When you're a chassan before the wedding,
you daven the mincha of Erev Yom Kippur. Right over there it says, because Yom Kippur, when the chassan and the kala stand under the chuppah, it's like Yom Kippur for them, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu cancels their sins. And he nullifies their sins, and as if they're starting all over again, starting anew. Anyway, that's where we are, right? Where's it gone? Oh, Eicha Salavadi Tachem V'Asachem Rivchem. Verse number 13. Hovu lachem anashim chachamim u'nevoinim v'yeduim l'shivteichem. So now you're going to have to bring wise people to help with the leadership inside of the Jewish people. V'asimem b'roshechem, and they're going to be put into place. Who are we talking about? Hold on a second. What was the idea? The idea was to take one person in charge of 10, and to put one person in charge of 50 people, and one person in charge of 100, and one person in charge of 1,000, and then you've got Moshe on the top. Right, so we've got one person, there are 600,000 men, right? We've got 60,000 people in charge of 10. And then you've got in charge of 50, you've got 12,000 people. In charge of 1,000, we've got 60. Right? And then we've got Moshe Rabbeinu on the top, which means we've got a lot of people involved over here in the hierarchy of leadership within the Jewish people. We've got a lot of people at the bottom in charge of, each one in charge of 10. And then we've got less people in charge of 50, and then even less in charge of 100. And then we've got the ones in charge of 1,000. So what's Pshat? Pshat is like this, that the Jewish people were supposed to come to Moshe and say, Moshe, this is ridiculous. We have you, right? Why on earth would we want to have anybody except for you telling us what to do? But the Jewish people didn't do that. They said, whoa, great idea. Why did they think it was a great idea? Because they knew that Moshe was incorruptible. They knew that. Now, what's the problem? When you've got people in leadership, these people are not just there to teach them what the halacha is, not to tell them what they can do on Shabbos, what they can't do on Shabbos, but these people are there also to rule on all different kinds of cases where one fellow's having a fight with another fellow, that this cow belongs to me, or the goat belongs to me, or this piece belongs to me, or that belongs to me. The Jewish people got all excited. Why? Because they understood that out of all of these people that were being put into place, and we're talking about tens and thousands, right? Some of them are going to be corruptible. And if some of them are corruptible, that means that I can take somebody to Beis Din, I can take somebody to court, and I'm going to have the ability to be able to win. Why? Not in the strength of my argument, but simply because I can pay off the person. And Moshe Rabbeinu realizes that's a terrible thing. Look at verse number 14. V'ta'anu oisi. So v'ta'anu means two things. V'ta'anu means you answered me and you said that it's a great idea, fantastic. But if you look at here, v'ta'anu or see Rashi, about 3/4 of the way down on the first paragraph of Rashi, the first column of Rashi, that you wanted it, la'anatchem, in order for you, it was good for you. So listen to what Rashi says. Rashi's just citing the rabbis. Lachem haya lachem la'ashiv. How should you have answered me when I gave you the opportunity of putting in this hierarchy of leadership? How should you have answered me? Listen to this. Rabbeinu Moshe, our teacher Moshe. Mimi na lilmod. Who is it better to learn from? Mimcha or mitalmidcha? From you or from your Talmud? Right? It's clear, no? Given the opportunity to learn something from the absolute expert, the absolute everything in that particular field. Who do you want? You want to learn from him? You want to learn from somebody who learned from him? Loi mimcha, not from you. He says, you caused me a lot of anguish over here. I knew exactly what you were thinking. There's going to be lots of judges. We're going to bring a little bit of just a little gift. What's it called? Bakshish, a little bit of something, and then everything's going to be okay, right? The Moshel says like this. That it was supposed to be a good idea. No, bring in all these people. Moshe Rabbeinu knew exactly what was going on.
Why did he allow this to continue?
Oh, why did he allow it to continue? Right, so we're going now back to the Parshat of Yisro. This was really Yisro's idea. So is it a good idea or it's not a good idea? When Moshe Rabbeinu puts it together in the Parshat of Yisro, it sounds like it's a good idea.
Throughout all the other Parshot, Moshe's been ordering that the Rosh Shvatim take on all kinds of responsibilities
for
their own groups.
Right.
And
Here,
and he's also mentioned, Moshe's mentioned this before, get one man for 100 and then get another somewhere. It's not the first time. It's been
what's going on over here in Pasha's Devarim? This is not new. He's recapping everything that took place. And now he's utilizing this time just before he dies to let the Jewish people know that they made a few mistakes on the way. Right, which means like this, he's not saying now that he's introducing the concept of the hierarchy, but rather he's saying, this is what you did way back when, 40 years ago, this is what you did. The ta'anuoti, Rashi's saying that he's a play on the words. It doesn't just mean that you answered me and you said, but it also means you caused me anguish. Inui. You afflicted me when you said, okay, great idea, you afflicted me. Why? Because I know that your kavanah was no good. I know that what you were saying was no good.
So you can buy them up.
Yeah. You know what it's similar to? When the Jewish people came to Shmuel, to Samuel, and they said to Shmuel, we want a king. But if the Jewish people would have come to Shmuel and said, we want a king, because obviously that's supposed to be a malchus, and that's going to reflect God's majesty down here in the world, that would have been fantastic, right? Why did they ask for a king, though? What does it say?
They
Be like all the other nations.
We want to be like the other nations of the world. That's it. We want to look like everyone else. So Shmuel comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he says, this is a negative reflection on me. Obviously, I'm not good enough for them. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, it's a negative reflection on me, not on you. You don't have to worry about it. And Shmuel says to them, he says, what do you want a king for? You know what the king's going to do? He's going to draft you into the army against your will. He's going to take your land away against your will. He's going to make you pay taxes, right? And what do the Jewish people say? Oh, wait, that's okay. That's fine. We're okay with that. Right? Why? Because we want to look like everybody else.
Pay taxes like everybody else.
Well, there has to
No, I think shots like this. That they
there
wanted
has to be some form of government. That will
Oh, good.
accomplish
So
it.
here, but Shmuel's coming. Shmuel is he's a de facto leader of the Jewish people. Right? Now, what does that mean to be the de facto leader of the Jewish people? In the time of Shmuel, there was no necessity to have some kind of consistent leadership. Things were running very well and very smoothly. Shmuel was there to make sure that it should continue like that, which means Shmuel is a HaKadosh Baruch Hu's spokesperson in the world. It says many times in Sefer, the book of the prophets, right, in the Nevi'im, that that the Jewish people would do whatever is good in their eyes. They would do whatever was good in their eyes. That within the leadership of the Nevi'im, of the prophets, it wasn't necessary per se to have some kind of king figure ruling over everybody. There was a rulership over there. The other nations of the world wanted a king because they just wanted to look like everybody else. But what's the pshat with the taxes? I think is that it gives the Jews the opportunity to be inventive how to avoid paying them.
Yeah.
Right? If there's no taxes, then they can't do that.
A lot of accountants were out of work.
For sure. And Jews in accounting that's a great shidduch, right? So Moshe Rabbeinu is telling them, you caused me anguish when you agreed to this whole system. That I came and I brought people. Who did I bring? Anashim chachamim v'yiduim. Right? Wise and well known. What's missing over here? Up on the top it says, Havu lachem anashim chachamim unevonim v'yiduim. Nevonim means understanding. Nevonim seems to drop out on the way over here. It's gone. It's disappeared. Well, what's pshat? That Moshe Rabbeinu looks around and he sees that within the Jewish people, it's not so Parshat to find nevonim. A navon is somebody who's got some kind of inner innate ability to hear the truth of what's going on. That's something which is not so easy to do. So who does he put into place? He puts in place, they're all wise people, but they're not nevonim. He can't find that. Do you know, there's a fascinating thing in the halacha. It says like this: when a judge is sitting on a beis din, and the judge is just convinced that the person standing in front of him is lying, but he's got no proof. He just feels it. It's like a it's just an intuition. You just know it. It's forbidden for the judge to rule according to his intuition. You are only allowed to judge according to the facts that you've got in front of you. The only thing that a judge can do in such a situation is to recuse himself. And say, I don't want to. I can't listen to this case anymore. I feel that it's I feel that I'm not being objective enough, and that pass it over to somebody else.
Is there an example of that ever happening?
Yeah, for sure, lots of times. You got this guy standing in front of you, he's telling you something, you know perfectly well that he's not telling you the truth, you know it, but you just can't prove it. Right? It happens to every single person. I'm sure you've spoken with people in the past and you just know that what the fellow's telling you is not true.
My wife asked me the other day, she said, would you accept, if you were a judge, would you accept the case of defending, not a judge, a lawyer? I mean, it's the same sort of thing, you're dealing with justice. Would you defend a Nazi war criminal? In Israel, the government says, okay, we need someone to take this case, right? Eichmann murder. Would you do it?
Didn't they have one? Yeah.
You've got to have someone.
A court-appointed lawyer.
Administer justice, so you get a lawyer for
It's an interesting question, right?
Well, when Eichmann was here, he had lawyers defending him.
Yeah, for sure. But I tell you what, the Eichmann lawyers, they were pretty lucky because it was indefensible. They didn't get up and try to say that he never did it. They didn't have very much to do or to say. The question over here is, again, what do you do? Never mind a situation like that. What about somebody who's practicing criminal law? This is your panosa, right? And you can make a lot of money defending criminals. But you know that these people are guilty. How did Rabbi Eliyahu, alav shalom, how did he always used to say? He said, I never had an innocent client. He never had one. And that's how he made his money.
Is that allowed to defend someone that you know?
Ask Rabbi Breidowitz. Rabbi Breidowitz said that Rabbi Breidowitz is a lawyer by profession, and he was a professor of law in Maryland University. And he said that the reason why he went into the world of academia rather than go into the world of actual law was because he said he never found anywhere any niche in the legal field that he felt completely comfortable with practicing. Because I don't know. Things are always. I mean, that's part of being a successful lawyer is the ability to, to sort of round off the corners a little bit and to to work in a way that's, it might be legal, but it may not be ethical. Right, and he said that's why he went into World Academia in order to try to instill in his students at least some kind of an inkling of, that maybe it's correct to be honest. I don't know.
If you're a defense lawyer, for sure some of your clients will be guilty, even though you never ask them whether or not they have committed.
Yeah, for sure.
Because
you don't want to know.
You can't know, because if you do know, you have to recuse yourself.
It's not Parshat, it really isn't. I'm being serious. I when I was in yeshiva as a bocher, when I was in yeshiva many years ago, I had the poisek in the yeshiva, the halachic authority in the yeshiva. He told the boys that he thought that it was also to learn law. He didn't think that it was possible for to learn law, to become a lawyer, because he felt that it wasn't possible to work according to Jewish law. And what do you do when you've got a Jewish client? What do you do then? And secondly, because of these ethical, moral dilemmas which are going to crop up in all over the place inside of law.
What about the Beit Din? The Beit Din are dealing with these things all the time.
Oh, so at least in the Beit Din, again, I don't want to get involved over here in a discussion about whether these people are straight and honest, but at least the Beit Din is working according to halacha.
But they have no power to enforce.
That's something else. But you know what's fascinating about Jewish law is that there's no concept in Jewish law of a lawyer. With inside of Jewish law, you don't have lawyers.
Witnesses.
You have judges and witnesses.
Right, for sure. So Lamaisa, who's your lawyer? The lawyer is your judge. The lawyer is the judge. Because if really all you're interested in is finding out the truth, then you don't. The idea of paying somebody to get up and say that you're not guilty, or paying somebody to get up and say the other person is guilty, is contrary to what Jewish law really stands for. Jewish law is the pursuit of emes, the pursuit of truth. That needs to be left up to the people who are experts in Jewish law to be able to decide whether somebody is guilty or whether they're not.
In a lot of the tefillos in the Siddur, you've got the word sanegor, mekatreg, things like that. So, but that's not about people. It's
about our actions, right? That you've got a defender and you've got an accuser, right? And every action that we do brings a defending power into the world, an accusing power into the world. If somebody does something that they're supposed to do, then it brings a tremendous, like a defending angel that's going to be there for you. And if a person, Khalila, does something they're not supposed to do, it's going to bring an accusing angel into being. And I'll tell you, the bad news about all of this is that these people are incorruptible, these angels, right? Which means that in the Olam HaEmes, in the world of truth, it's not shaykh, it's not applicable to suggest that you'll be able to wriggle out of something, but diminished responsibility. There's no such thing as diminished responsibility. Either you're responsible or you're not. And there are, again, in halacha, there are all kinds of people that could fall into the category of not being responsible for their actions, if only momentarily or on a continual basis, depending on their mental state of being. But otherwise, you're responsible for what you've done. And if you're responsible for what you've done, then you need to stand up and, accept whatever verdict is given. So the idea of a lawyer is something which is really, the truth is it's contrary to Jewish ethics.
Yes, we depend on 3 judges, and they depend on the jury system. So it becomes an emotional issue between the prosecuting attorney and the defending attorney.
Again, I'm really not critiquing the civil court system. I'm really not. But I am left wondering why a board, a delegation of 12 people who have no legal background whatsoever and don't understand anything from anything, how they could possibly, how could the something as important as whether you're guilty or not be left in their hands is beyond me. It really is. I don't get it.
One of the Noahide laws says make yourself
set up justice. Courts of justice, which means again, you're fine. You can have a court according to the Noahide system. You can have a jury system. That's okay. I'm just left wondering why is it okay? And it might be acceptable according to the laws, but why would anybody be happy to leave their future in the hands of 12 people who are going to be manipulated by the lawyers? That's what it comes down to.
Cultural relic of times of witchcraft and burning of people at the stake. It's something that hasn't been dropped. That's all. That's what it is. Because that's where it came from.
Well, the emphasis that in the Spanish Inquisition they had it right. They burnt people at the stake. They didn't bother with juries. Are you kidding? They just burnt them. I have a friend, which of course in and of itself is a pretty novel idea. But I have a friend who trained to be a lawyer, and actually after he graduated, he got a job in the municipality of Chicago's legal department, and his job was to defend the municipality in all the various court cases that were going on. There were lots of them, so there were many lawyers that were working there. He said the first job he ever got was defending the municipality. A lady had been walking along the sidewalk, and the sidewalk, there'd been a big crack over there, and she tripped and she broke her leg. And she was suing the municipality. And he was supposed to be defending the municipality. And he said like this, he told me, he said that of course the municipality was wrong. And of course it was their responsibility. But he was defending them, right? So he gets up, it's in front of a jury. He gets up from another jury and he said, I don't know what this lady's called, Mrs. Jones, right? He says, Mrs. Jones, he says, were you watching the sidewalk the whole time? And she says, well, most of the time. He says, were you distracted? Did you lift your eyes up at any point? So she said, yes, of course I did. So he says, for how long? What would you say? Would you say it was possible that you lifted your eyes up for 2 seconds or for 3 seconds? So she said, for sure. I mean, that's nothing, right? 2-3 seconds is nothing. So he says, you know what he did? He says, members of the jury, watch. And he walked from one side of the courtroom to the other side of the courtroom in 3 seconds. Because 3 seconds sounds like nothing, right? But you can do quite a lot inside of 3 seconds if you put your mind to it. He says this lady's not watching the sidewalk for 3 seconds, and she's now suing the municipality because she wasn't careful, because she didn't see that when she fell over. He said he won the case. And he said that evening he handed in his resignation because he knew that she was right and they were wrong. He said he couldn't. He said it was wrong. It was absolutely wrong. He handed his resignation and he stopped working as a lawyer and actually went into chinuch and is very successful today. But a lot of the legal system is built on my father had a friend who made a fortune as a lawyer. His expertise was finding mistakes in contracts that were written by other lawyers. And then either the side that the mistake was written, so either they would utilize that mistake in order to have it work in their favor, or in order to nullify the contract. This fellow made a lot of money. I don't know. Is that okay? I mean, legally it's fine, for sure it is. I'm just left wondering, the ethical dimension of what's going on. So for sure you can say that the person who wrote the contract should have been more careful.
So you're part of the
Say
system
that.
where things are being cleaned up all the time, in a way.
Yeah, you're getting cleaned out. That's why they have legal insurance, right? Anyway, Moshe Rabbeinu understood all of that before the legal system was put into place, right? He understood perfectly well that what these people were asking for was something which was completely and absolutely wrong. Because what? The minute you've got a bunch of judges, you've got the ability for corruption. It's inconceivable with thousands of people that it's inconceivable that one of them is not going to have a little crack somewhere, right, in their armor. Something's going to be, and somebody's going to be able to find that weak spot. לא יסקרו פונים במשפט כקטון כגדול תשמעו ולא יתהגו במפני איש כי המשפט לאלוקים הוא. Moshe Rabbeinu was saying like this, what was the function of the judges? The function of the judges is to judge according to what God wants. It's got nothing to do with how big the person is, how small the person is. והדבר שיקשה מכם תקריבון אליי ושמעתיו. And he says, whatever is difficult for you, when it goes up the hierarchy from the 10 to the 50 to the 100 to the 1,000, and the people in the 1,000 don't know how to answer, bring it to me and I'll take care of it. We're going to stop over here. And in Mitzvah Hashem, the next thing we're going to talk about is, of course, the spies, but that's for tomorrow.